Hello and welcome to the BloodStream podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and BloodStream Media, and made possible by our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I'm your patient, advocate, and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your healthcare advocate, nonprofit nerd, and other host, Amy Board, reminding you to please speak with a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions.
Oh, yes. Wow. Okay. Big decision day for Amy Board over there. On today's show, we are joined by Cazandra Campos-Macdonald. You've heard her here on BloodStream. You've heard her on the Pain podcast. She's a blogger. She's a pastor. She's an everything.
Yes, she is.
She gives us the latest in her pain and mental health journey. Since she last spoke with us, she has had some pretty monumental discoveries and steps forward in her journey, which she was so generous in reaching out to say, I'd be happy to share them if you think the listeners would like to hear about it. And we said, oh, yeah, we'd like to hear about it. No doubt they would too. That is today. So you're going to hear from Kaz in a little bit, as well as from Laurence Woollard, who again has been on this show and is the writer and host of the Global Hemophilia Report. Had a chance to sit down with him while we were in Houston, Texas for the NHF BDC. That interview is coming up in a little bit, as is the latest from The Well. Brought to you by Jessica Lauren Richmond. All that and more is coming up on today's episode. Welcome to BloodStream.
Listeners, as always, thank you for joining Patrick and I here on BloodStream. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast.
Such a good idea.
Episode of BloodStream can also be listened to and shared directly from the BloodStream Media Facebook page.
Directly. You don't have to go anywhere.
Which is nuts. And as always, if you've got suggestions for topics or guests, or if you have questions for Patrick or myself, ping us on social media or email us at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com. And we're always casting. Always casting. So if you would like to share your story or just interested, want to hear about some of the opportunities, email us at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com.
There we go. I think they got the idea there. But it's true. Even if you just want to know what the opportunities are. Like, how do you know if you're a fit for something if you don't know what they are? Listeners, I do also want to remind you, as I always do at about this time, that the BloodStream podcast is made possible by our presenting sponsor, Takeda.
Takeda.
Yes, that's right. Takeda. Takeda's got this website, bleedingdisorders.com. where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. Takeda believes in a world free of bleeds. Amy Board? So do I.
Oh my gosh.
And they are dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support to help patients throughout their treatment journey, wherever on that journey they may be. You can learn more by simply visiting bleedingdisorders.com. It's not a fussy thing, it's a simple thing. bleedingdisorders.com. And for their founding and ongoing support of the BloodStream podcast, I would just like to say thanks, Takeda.
Thanks, Takeda.
All right, we got a fun show today. So we got Kaz, we got Laurence, we got The Well.
The Well.
I feel like we need to just get into it. Amy Board, is there anything you want to say to the listeners up top?
Not really. I mean, I guess I just want to say to the listeners that I'm finally in the club. I finally have medicine that's in my refrigerator. Injectables. I have my migraine medicine in the refrigerator. I put it in today, and I just want you to know, bleeding disorder community, which I have been with y'all for over a decade, and I love you so much. You were the ones that I thought of. I was like, yes, I'm a part of the group.
I might get sued by HIPAA. I don't know how it works. But literally earlier, Amy and I were comparing infusion site stuff. And it was a moment of bonding that only us here at Believe Limited BloodStream Media and the bleeding disorders community can really appreciate.
I inject an antibody. Whatever.
Said with the casual cool of someone who knows. Oh, that's pretty great. So, yes, welcome to the club. We are so happy to have you. We're going to have new committee signups are starting soon. So, got a lot of stuff in the club going on.
I might share my story on bleedingdisorders.com. JK, everybody, my blood clots.
Maybe we can create a tab. We'll create a tab. Oh, look,
but speaking of pain,
wherever on your journey you may be.
Yes, that's true. But speaking of pain, I've dealt with migraine pain, and so let's talk to Kaz about her pain because she is so articulate and wonderful.
That is a great point. So we will get to that right after this quick break.
This next segment is brought to you by Genentech. Genentech is a leading biotech company that has built a strong partnership with the hemophilia A community through continued support and innovation. They have created a different hemophilia A treatment that you might want to learn more about. To read about the efficacy and safety profile of this treatment, visit www.treathemophilia.com.
I'm Kaz, and I am the mother of 2 sons with severe hemophilia A and inhibitors. I have a journey that, along with bleeding, goes with chronic pain and depression and anxiety. And I have been a contributor to the Pain Podcast and talked a lot, very openly, about my issues with chronic pain that I have in my neck and my back, and it's been going on for many years. And I had a pain doctor, a specialist, for about 10 years. And this all happened during COVID, so everything was weird during COVID, we know. And I was at a point where I just felt like I was going crazy with my pain. I asked, what other interventions can we do? These injections aren't working. And the short story is that I feel like they gave up on me and just threw medication at me. And I have been a longtime user of opioids, Dilaudid and some other things, to the point where I was taking them scheduled throughout the day to function. And I mean, I could drive, I could work. I needed to have those medications in me so that I could do the things I needed to do. But then I started feeling like, I think that my pain is getting worse with these meds. And I thought I was going crazy. I finally reached out to get a second opinion. And getting a second opinion for anything is really hard because you have to start all over. And it's like, is it worth it? But I'm so glad I did. I found a new doctor. And he said, here are some things that we can try. And for the first time in years, I'm like, okay, this guy is seeing me and listening to me. But he said, as for your medication, you have to be off of all of that because I will not monitor or regulate those meds. They're too strong. So here I was. What do I do? So I go to my old pain doctor and say, hey, I got to get off these meds. I'm seeing this new interventional guy. And he was all on board with that. His response to me in getting off these high-power pain meds was, well, take half, go a few days, then take a little bit less. And that was it. There was no plan. There was no, this is how you do it step by step. And I began to slowly get off these meds, and it was not easy. Oh my goodness, I had no idea how difficult it would be. But I felt like my pain is getting worse. It felt more intense than it ever had. And that's when I knew I need to get off of all this stuff to start over. And then I realized my depression was really wreaking havoc on me. And I thought, surely it has to be the meds or something, but it was different. And I had been on the same medication for depression for a long time and thought maybe I need something different. And my therapist said, Cassandra, I think it's time. But I got to the point where I said in my appointment with her, gosh, I just wish I could go somewhere for a few days and get this ironed out. Full disclosure, I was having suicidal ideations. My mind was just not good. So I checked myself into a facility for about a week and came out thinking, okay, I'm feeling a little better, but that didn't last very long. When I got out of that center, I was off all of my meds, all of my pain meds. Nothing was in my body. And then finally got help with a new psychiatrist who I'm still working with because my meds still aren't quite right. So this has been a couple of months. It takes time for these things to work out. But then my therapist said, Cassandra, it really sounds like you're dealing with post-acute withdrawal syndrome. And I'm like, what? They call it PAWS. See, post-acute withdrawal syndrome is one of those things that people think heroin addicts or people that are taking drugs illegally off the street, that they're the ones who go and dry out and get sober, that they deal with that. But then there's people like me who take meds per the doctor's orders, even though they're really high-powered stuff that you need. You still have that withdrawal, even though I thought I didn't have the shakes and all these weird things because I was the way I was doing it. But a couple of weeks ago, I had a horrible week and I thought, what is wrong with me? And then I realized it was truly this pause stuff. Like I would be in the recliner and I would see that I need to go clean up the kitchen and I just could not get up. And it felt like lead in my feet. And when I am at the worst of my depression, like a lot of people can get, for me, it feels like I'm in this deep pit with this heavy, cold quilt, this heavy blanket over me, and I can't move and get out. For me, with pause, it's like it doesn't feel like a quilt. It feels like this heavy coat is on you that you can sort of move, but not really. And it just sort of stifles you. Yet when you see me in the world, because I'm a pastor, I go to church, I do my thing, I preach, I do all this stuff with my congregation and my family. Most people would never know it because I'm very high functioning. This thing about pause opened my eyes and helped me to not feel so crazy. But it just goes to show that if we don't pay attention to this mental health business, right? What is going to happen? What would have happened, I hate to think, if I had not said anything and really had, because I started to have a plan. And I've never done that. And that's not a good thing. A plan to just say, I'm done with everything. And it's kind of scary even just to say out loud. If I had gone and had to get my gallbladder out, and that would be okay, why is it not okay for us to say, hey, I'm raising this big old white flag and I need medical help because my mental health is suffering and I'm going to go in the hospital to take care of it? Why is there such a stigma to that? And so if there's anything that someone is listening today that can take away from that, is that if you need extra help, you need to get it and not be afraid or feel like you're less than, because I don't feel less than from all of this. It's really brought to light for me that we have this shame about going in or even saying, I see a psychiatrist. We're a little bit better about saying we go to therapists, but when it comes to psychiatrist or hospital for mental health, boy, she's really nuts, or there's really a problem there. And why do we do that? Getting off all this medication has been very freeing. Now, I know that people that live with chronic pain, some could never probably do that. I get it. But man, I have seen how there are some of these doctors and types of thought. We're going to throw meds at them, they'll feel better, and we'll move on. There's nothing else I can do. Let's go on to the next person. Or you have these other doctors like my new guy who's like, no, I think there's some interventions we can do. And so I'm getting ready to have the first of 2 ablations in my neck. They never talked about that at the other guy before. And so I'm glad that there's some hope, but sometimes in order for us to have hope for something better for ourselves, we have to step outside of the box. It's a little scary and say, yeah, I need to go somewhere else. I need another opinion. That to me is the scariest part. And sometimes it takes a third opinion. But for me, I'm glad I did that. And I hope that people out there that are struggling and are just doped up on meds, because sometimes you feel that way. And I'm just speaking for myself, but getting off of it again, it's been hard. There's days I wish I had something, but more days than not, I'm not missing it as much. Yes, I'm still in pain, but it's bearable. And I'm looking forward to what this next intervention is going to do for me.
Hi, I'm Mel Forrest, the host of The Pain Pod. We all know that pain is a part of life, but did you know that almost 50 million Americans are dealing with chronic pain? This begs the question, what do we know and understand about pain? On The Pain Pod, we explore this and other pain-related questions by talking with patients, clinicians, and experts about what it's like to manage, treat, and live with chronic pain. So if you're one of those 50 million people who experience chronic pain or just have an interest in learning more about pain, you can find The Pain Pod wherever you listen to podcasts and on BloodStreamMedia.com. Or just click on the link in the show notes. And I promise, it won't be painful.
If you have sickle cell disease, how often do painful crises have you visiting the doctor? Pfizer is now enrolling a research study of an investigational medicine that may help prevent pain crises caused by sickle cell disease. If you have seen a healthcare provider for 2 or 10 sickle cell crises in the past year, you may be able to participate. To speak with the study team, visit clinicaltrialscd.com. With your help, we can pursue new treatment options for sickle cell disease. Learn more at clinicaltrialscd.com or click the link in the show notes.
Thank you. Thank you. thank you, Cazandra Campos-Macdonald, for your transparency, your generosity, your attention to yourself, and how much you care about the community.
Yes.
As Kaz is a regular blogger for Hemophilia News Today, she has blogs on her own website. As mentioned, she's been a part of the Pain Podcast, so go check out her other content if you resonated with what she had to share with us today. And again, Kaz, a big thank you. Amy, I tremendously respect and admire that woman.
Yes. And it was just lovely for her to like reach out and be proactive about it and be like, do you think this would be...
I was very touched, sincerely, by that.
Yes.
And felt trusted.
And we felt too, dear listeners, that, you know, you would like and would get something out of her story and her updates. So anyway...
100%, 100%. So we'll move now, or in a moment anyway, into my conversation with Laurence from the NHF-BDC. But Amy Board, is there anything you want to tell us before we get to that?
Hey, the BloodStream podcast is brought to you in part by a new educational gene therapy resource from CSL Behring called Heme Evolution.
Ooh.
As gene therapy research continues for people living with hemophilia B, CSL Behring has developed an educational website called Heme Evolution that allows visitors to explore the advancing science around gene therapy and the potential to address unmet needs in some people with this condition. Gene therapy is an innovative approach to treatment for a medical condition by introducing a new, fully functioning or working gene into the body, or by turning off or changing the gene that is causing the condition. For people with hemophilia B, gene therapy has the potential to sustain blood clotting ability. To learn more, check out www.hemeevolution.com. Thank you again to CSL Behring, and remember to check out www.hemeevolution.com by clicking on that link in the program notes.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, CSL. And here is Laurence. All right, I'm here with Laurence. We're hanging out here in my hotel room at the Hilton Americas in Houston during NHS Bleeding Disorders Conference. Laurence, thanks for joining me on BloodStream today.
Thanks so much, Patrick, and what hotel room it is.
Isn't it so special? Look at this wall over here. Look at all those colors on it. And
looks really funky.
A great view of not the rooftop of a smaller building. Not much to look at. You know, Josh has an all-time hotel room view. I was in his room last night, and it's like the best hotel room view I've seen in years. This is not quite that, but that's not why we're here. We're here because it's the Bleeding Disorders Conference. Your first time, though, coming to the NHF-BDC, right?
It is. It's the first time at the event, but also my first time in Houston, and what an absolute pleasure it is. So.
Yeah? Highlights thus far, a few days in. We're recording this on, Friday of the conference, about 11 a.m. local time. So far, what are some of the highlights?
Well, I think, firstly, in terms of actually Houston, it's still amazing me every time I come to the States how big everything is.
Yes. Houston and Texas in particular, I know I've said that to you before. I just have to emphasize again, not everywhere in the States is quite this big.
The roads are glorious. The roads are absolutely glorious.
The roads, the tables, the hallways, the ceilings, everything.
But not the coffee.
You're not liking the coffee so far. This is a bugaboo for you, I've noted today.
It really, even though our Brits aren't very good at coffee either.
No.
But it's the milk. What's up with these cream
we're very
milk?
I don't know.
It's just, you know.
What in the UK when you have coffee? What's generally out? Milk? What else do you have next to it? Cream? You don't have cream?
No, I mean, there's all sorts now, right? Lacto-free milk, soya, almond, oat milk.
Yeah, cashew milk. Yeah, coconut milk. You name it.
So, yeah.
You name it, they milk it.
Man, you should copyright that phrase.
I'm working on it. All right, so the coffee stinks, but you love the roads. Anything about the conference itself so far?
Yeah, let's get to that. Yeah, no, honestly, it's been really good. And I think for me, it's super important to sort of embed myself within that kind of US community context.
Why is that?
Just to understand, actually, and just kind of see some of those, I think, one, cultural differences, but two, actually just hear what community members are speaking about, what some of the kind of the real challenges are at the moment. I think I was in a health equity session yesterday, which was really fascinating, hearing from some community members, just some of their individual challenges, particularly from a few female members of the community spoke up, particularly around some of the gender bias, some of the confrontations that they've had with clinical professionals around their diagnosis. Yeah. But also, again, just putting into context the sort of socioeconomic influences and conditions.
Yes.
And what, and how they underpin health outcomes. And again, what as a community, what as NHF, what as a US community can the community do collectively to address some of these challenges.
Yeah.
But it's hard, Patrick. I think that's that's what came out the session. You know, it isn't one single answer. It's not simple. You know, again, it's multifactorial, and I think just requires leadership and, you know, people up the top, you know, really kind of sponsoring these kind of big programs of work. You know, this is system level thinking. Yeah,
and prioritizing the highest needs.
Definitely.
For, you know, we have listeners around the world, but the majority of our listeners are US based. Many, I'm sure, have attended either the BDC or HFA's national meeting or their local US chapter member organization affiliate meetings. Can you give us a little bit of again, you've only been here a few days, but based on what you've observed and taken in thus far, how does a meeting like this compare to, say, the EHC's meeting or a meeting that the UK Hemophilia Society may have for patients and families? Give us a little bit of comparison, if you could, just to help us understand.
Yeah, definitely. Well, naturally, size. I mean, everything is much bigger, and in terms of obviously the audience size as well, but obviously for being, from the UK and sort of, a European, that direct to patient marketing, is always, even
strikes you as a little...
always, even obviously I've been to I've been fortunate and privileged enough to come to the States a few times, but it particularly within this meeting, it's still sort of kind of hits me really, particularly in terms of the stands within the exhibition hall, which is really colourful, and there's some really
is colourful.
It really is colourful, and there's some super cool activities for some of the younger kids and the families, which I absolutely love, and I think it's just a really awesome vibe.
Yes.
I think just the ability to see people coming together again, it's really visceral.
Yes.
But I think I think it's because of obviously how in the US, in terms of treatment access, obviously being on an insurance-based system, it's obviously very different for Europeans like myself. I think, again, it always seems quite a topical issue. And I think also I was in a gene therapy and novel therapeutic session yesterday, and they were actually looking at the availability of products. I mean, it was upwards of 30.
Yeah, it's a lot.
For factor VIII, and then obviously less for factor IX, but still
numerous.
From the days of just having one product. So just even contemplating for community members in the US that level of choice, and how they're making an informed decision about which product is right for them, while also thinking about their insurance company and actually what product they can get access to. Right. I think for me, again, from a European perspective, is just is fascinating, considering if I think for the UK we're on a tender-based system and we only have availability of a certain amount of products that.
Based on the contracts that the government makes, right?
Exactly that. Yeah, I think even for haemophilia, I think it's upwards of 4 or 5 products.
So not it's a 20 plus.
Right. It's a completely different context. So I think that's absolutely fascinating when you're in this setting.
Yeah, certainly. And then of course, whether UK, America, when we compare the availability of products anywhere in the world for hemophilia to other disease states where 90% plus, 95% is the number that was quoted, most often, at least at the last few years, don't have in this country what the FDA's approval is sort of the before after a drug is, available commercially for patients in the United States. There are 95% of rare diseases in the United States don't have a single FDA drug approved. And to your point, we've got dozens. So we're a very privileged community, especially those of us that live in the United States and in the UK as well, where we you don't have necessarily all the same kinds of access, but when we compare it to our blood brothers, in places like Nepal or in Egypt, or it's a much different picture, as we both know.
But also, Patrick, I think hearing about some of the experiences of members in more sort of rural settings.
Yeah,
of
that's
America.
too. Yeah,
I mean, it sounds from what I perceive, Patrick. Honestly, it sounds like the examples and case studies from the developing world.
Yeah, absolutely. And taking another step further, Puerto Rico is a part of the United States, and Puerto Rico has been hit by natural disasters on numerous occasions over the last number of years. And that's part of this country, and the care there and the availability of treatment to begin with, let alone when natural disaster puts the country into turmoil. We have to care and be responsive to folks there, folks in rural communities, as much as we are anywhere else in the United States or the world. Definitely. So I'm glad that struck you. I imagine it's a bit similar to in the UK, that the patients who are further out from the comprehensive care centers and who are not as connected to their centers or the advocacy organizations likewise have outcomes that are similar to the rural American population. Would you say that's true, or do you see a difference?
I think, obviously, for me, Patrick, it's quite hard to answer without having the sort of, referring to the evidence base. I mean, anecdotally,
sure, in
terms of engagement,
right.
I completely align with that. I think one of the previous meetings, actually might have been pre-COVID, meeting a guy who never knew any of that advocacy community even existed, but was told about it through his clinical center. So I think I think in the UK, I think in Europe, but actually even came up in the health equity session yesterday, looking at the evidence around postcode. And we refer to it as a postcode lottery.
Yeah.
And that level of provision and care that you receive solely based on where you live.
Right,
And it's unfair.
Totally.
Patrick, it is unfair. But that's why you need strong advocacy. I think I was just going to say 2 other points, I think, that have so far come through in the meeting. I think one, obviously we had the recent announcement about the first gene therapy being approved by the EMA.
Yeah, I think it was and yesterday.
Yeah, it's a couple of days ago, right? So clearly gene therapy's a hot topic at conference, and I know there's some more sessions on innovative technologies today.
Certainly, yeah.
And lastly, just about the opening ceremony.
Yeah.
Again, that's a bit of a spectacle for a European.
Yeah. What did you think?
Yeah, Len Valentino in his red jacket.
Crushed it. I thought he did great. And Dawn's tribute to Val was beautiful.
Wow. And you know what? I only had the privilege of meeting Val once. And just, her words, they were super impactful. Some of the images of Val and, seeing him with other community members that I have relationships with, you do as well. It was a really sort of touching moment, actually. As someone that not really knowing Val on a personal level, but that was great. And as I said, those kind of opening sessions is a real spectacle, and I think it's great for some of the young kids that are in the hall.
I think it was great for me. I mean, I will say, I thought the keynote, I'm blanking on his last name, I should pull it up while we're chatting respectfully, but JR, the keynote speaker, he's a veteran who he's mentioned had to go through something like 20 different facial or plastic surgeries, and to just put it simply, his face in particular, but he had 3rd-degree burns all over his body from the bombings that took place while he was in active duty military at 19 years old. He's now, amongst other things, a motivational speaker. He was the keynote last night, and I thought he was absolutely extraordinary. I was captivated by everything he had to say from the moment he first started. Laurence, I don't know if you had a similar take, but I just found him terribly inspiring.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he, say this respectfully, sort of served his purpose, as it were.
Absolutely.
He really sort of instilled a lot of motivation and sort of belief in community members. Obviously, one, to maximize their time here while at conference, but actually when they go home, and to continue that advocacy, that activism.
And it's a daily thing. And that was something he pointed, J.R. Martinez is his name, the initials J.R. Martinez. He pointed out how every time someone looks at him and processes that his face looks different and he sees it in their eyes, he talked about there's that window of opportunity, could be triggered, but I also have the opportunity to teach people how to interact with me. And he said, I have to do it every day. And I was thinking, we have to do that too. It's not the same, but with
100%.
hemophilia, bleeding disorders, we have to teach people how to interact with us all the time. Advocates, school officials, employers, insurance people, clinicians, all of them. And it can be frustrating and exhausting, which is why you have to have community, you have to have support, you have to have self-care practices to give yourself a break. But as he pointed out, teaching people how to interact with you when you live with something that sets you apart from the general population, it's just a part of the package. And I thought he articulated that so beautifully.
I think another point, while it's top of mind, Patrick, I was in a session again yesterday where we heard from some nurse practitioners about some of the mental health needs of their patients, of their individuals that they're caring for, and some really dark stories actually of how they've been unable to support some of their younger guys to get access to mental health clinics or retreats or, you know, these kind of in-house provisions purely because they have to
infuse. They need to put a needle in their arm to infuse.
Unbelievable.
And extraordinarily damaging.
100%. And, you know, again, we heard a case of somebody committing suicide because obviously they were unable to get access to that particular service.
This is someone trying to get services and couldn't. You know, it's so hard to just get people who are in that position to seek services, and for them to then seek services and be denied because, you're bleeding disorder. Like,
unbelievable. But you saw a couple of these nurse practitioners. Unfortunately, I can't remember the centre, but if I find out, I'm sure you can put a link in the episode notes. Yeah, let me know. But they had actually come together and actually looked to kind of find a solution. One, by doing some research themselves, actually at a statewide level and at a country level, to see actually, are other centres experiencing the same issues?
Good.
And actually that really came through. I think actually one of the parts of the research that 40% of the clinical network weren't aware that even this was an issue.
Wow.
So actually, how do
40%?
they? Yeah, 40%. So how do they actually look to address that, to ensure that actually provision is made available for members of the community that are obviously experiencing mental health crisis?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's great to have you here. I mean, personally, of course, I love seeing you, love talking about this stuff with you, but I'm glad you're getting to just absorb more of the community here. You'll have touch points for the BDC, meeting new people and different people. I know we got a jet now because we both have to head down to the exhibit hall, but thanks for spending a few minutes with us. Listeners, as you well know, you can find Laurence on the Global Hemophilia Report. He's our writer and host there. Most recent episode on women with hemophilia, out now. Phenomenal episode. And coming up very soon will be our next episode with Donna D. McKelly, where the three of us recap essentially the first 6 episodes of season 1. So that'll be coming to you very soon as well over on the Global Hemophilia Report. So Laurence, thanks for today, and thanks for everything you do for the Global Hemophilia Report.
Thanks, Patrick. And always thank you for your hospitality and accommodation. And everybody's been super friendly so far. So thank you.
Laurence Woollard, that's your writer and host of the Global Hemophilia Report. Episodes out every month. The latest on women with hemophilia and the research priorities is a 90-minute, robust, expansive, comprehensive overview and deep dive.
A must listen, y'all.
For everyone that is about meeting unmet needs in the bleeding disorders community. That's available right now. GlobalHemophiliaReport.com. Thank you, Laurence. And thank you, CSL Behring. Do remember, listeners, to check out www.hemevolution.com. You can click on the link in the program notes. All right, listeners, coming up next, it is our latest foray to and from the well, led by none other than Jessica Lauren Richmond.
It also brings to mind the different kinds of suffering, right? Because you have the physical suffering, which for chronic illness, for aging, is something that is present all of the time. And then there's the question of acute suffering when you are in a dying state. What does that look like? And then there's the layer of existential suffering. What is happening within the mind and the body, or the mind and the heart, around what the body is experiencing? Because the body has unbelievable intelligence. Your body knows how to die.
The body is so smart. But it has the brain to work with, and the brain can think it's smart, but be really not the most smartest, can be a bit inefficient. See, the brain can perpetuate suffering beyond physical pain, and generally speaking, one would think that's unideal, wouldn't one? One would. The hypothesis: some suffering is obligatory. Life is pain, princess. Anyone telling you differently is actually selling you something. But some suffering is chosen willfully. And although it might be painful, I want to talk about why. Welcome to the well.
We are standing by a wishing well.
I was never confirmed. I'm not Catholic, but half my lineage is. I was never bat mitzvahed. I'm not officially a Jewish woman, but half my lineage is Jewish. All this is to say, I have learned a bit about prescribed suffering.
Suffering can sometimes reveal to us where our value systems are. right? Where am I placing my energy or my mind or my focus in this moment?
Not only can suffering reveal our value systems, sometimes suffering is an essential part of a value system. Such as, in Catholicism, did I do enough suffering to be considered good and worthy? In Judaism, oy vey, it is a blessing to suffer. No, in fitness, no pain, no gain. And a defining part of the value system of Buddhism is that suffering is a choice, which is at least sometimes true and, dare I say, helpful to think about a bit more deeply. I do dare.
In terms of suffering, it holds so much information and so much wisdom, and suffering usually comes up in a moment where we feel like we're lacking agency around something. And if we focus on the place where we lack agency, then that is what we continue to experience more of.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say sounds like suffering may be partially a control issue. Heather, whose voice I've been playing for you from the control room here at BloodStream Media Studios, describes suffering as a lack of agency, a lack of autonomous choice of action.
Versus when you can step back for a moment and say, like, where is my agency in this moment where it feels like I have none, right? Where am I placing my energy or my mind or my focus in this moment? Because that's then informing you where you can start asking your community for support, to be engaged with the places within yourself that are not suffering. You know, how do I experience more love in this moment when all I can think about is this chronic pain I have? Asking the people that you care for to be with you and being able to witness their actions in support of you.
So there's chronic suffering, acute physical suffering of the body. Remember growing teeth when you were, 4? How old? When do you grow teeth? And then there's existential attention suffering, you know, when it becomes hard to put attention on anything other than pain. When it becomes challenging to focus on or put attention to love and support. That kind of suffering is of the mind.
Suffering is a state of mind. Suffering is what you let it be. I know people that have, on the universal scale, probably experienced very little what people would consider loss, but to them it's been a tremendous, horrible burden to bear. And suffering is what you make it.
Suffering is what you make it. There's comparative suffering, for example, which plagues those addicted to social media. Comparative suffering is, as you guessed it, the suffering that comes from comparison. See, the good news for those with control issues, probably not you, is that unlike chronic pain or growing teeth when you're however old you are, comparative suffering is a choice. And in this world, your choices are the one thing you do control. So how do you set yourself up for success when making such a choice? You know, the choice to suffer or not to suffer.
I was having a conversation with my mom recently, and I said something about how easy life has been. And she's like, why would you say life has been easy? And I said, yes, all of these things happen, but we always had health insurance. We always had a roof over our head. We always had food. We always had a car. We always had clothing. And I don't want to make it sound as Pollyanna as, just count all your blessings. But I mean, it really is like, what do I have versus what I don't have? And yeah, there are trials and there are challenges and there are things that you have to go through, but you're allowed to go through them.
Allowed to go through them. Aha. So here's the thing. Did I do enough suffering to be considered good and worthy? Huh? It is a blessing to suffer. No. What? No pain, no gain. No. Suffering is a choice. Well, maybe not all suffering. Remember growing teeth? But okay, some sufferings though. As Dwayne said, challenges are things you have to go through, but, and more important to put attention to, is the fact that you're allowed to go through them. Through them. Because life is pain, princess, the experience of life is going to include all types of suffering, like Heather said. So when we do have the choice, no reason to spend more time on suffering than necessary. I mean, right?
Thank you, Jessica. And remember, listeners, if you enjoyed The Well and you like Jessica, you'll hear her every month on Flow. You'll find new episodes of Flow at bloodstreammedia.com.
If you have sickle cell disease, how often do painful crises have you visiting the doctor? Pfizer is now enrolling a research study of an investigational medicine that may help prevent pain crises caused by sickle cell disease. If you have seen a healthcare provider for 2 or 10 sickle cell crises in the past year, you may be able to participate. To speak with the study team, visit clinicaltrialscd.com. With your help, we can pursue new treatment options for sickle cell disease. Learn more at clinicaltrialscd.com or click the link in the show notes.
Amy Board, this was a fun episode.
Yes.
We've got our second episode of this month coming up in just another couple of weeks. And what do we have going on in that episode again?
Well, I'm going to be in Kenya and Uganda.
What? Why?
Filming for Save One Life. So I can't wait to
So cool.
follow. I won't be on the show, but I'll maybe give you a little.
You'll maybe give us a little.
Maybe a little.
Okay.
Maybe a little. But what do you have coming up on the show, Patrick James Lynch?
I get to talk to a longtime friend. You're going to hear this next in the interview itself. Annalise Ellis and I went to camp together 150 years ago, and she has von Willebrand disease, as she talks about on the show, and you will hear it coming up. However, it was when she had her first child earlier this year that von Willebrand disease took placement in her life unlike ever before. She reached out to me to say, it colored the entire experience and I want to talk about it. And sort of like with Kaz, when she reached out, I was like, you want to just talk to me or do you want to share it with the listeners? And she was like, I'd like to share it with the listeners.
So cool.
That's what you got coming up next time. If you haven't already, subscribe to the BloodStream podcast.
And with that is all for this episode.
Nice take, Amy Board. Listeners, reminder to subscribe to the BloodStream podcast wherever you listen, anywhere at all. Share this episode with family, friends, colleagues, humans of all kind.
Hey, you have a bleeding disorders or a health topic you'd like to hear us discuss more? Or is there an expert or guest that you're just dying to hear from? Want to inquire about storytelling or casting opportunities for BloodStream's podcast? You can do it for podcasts.
What?
Or for Believe Limited's films. You can do it for films.
Wow, so many things.
So many things. Email us at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com or connect with Bloodstream Media on social media. We are everywhere.
Everywhere. Name it.
Literally
We're there.
everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can follow myself or PJL on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn, and we would love to hear from you.